Hello again, everybody. Ben Jarofsky here. We're calling this Undecided Thursday, and here's why. Daniel Laurison standing by, sociology professor at Swarthmore, and perhaps the greatest Swarthmore graduate since Mama Cass. I told Daniel I would not make a Swarthmore joke. I'm sure there's absolutely nobody in the world who knows that joke. The only reason I know it is because of a song by Mamas and Papas, and I'm just a baby boomer, an old baby boomer, weighing in on the world's events. I know Daniel doesn't even get that joke because he's younger. Daniel's expert.
Mamas and Papas are.
Oh, wow, he stunned me with that. Daniel's expertise is the voter who doesn't vote, and we're going to be talking about that, or potential voters who don't vote. This is on my mind because I had a conversation with a friend of mine. We'll just start with this as a lead into what Daniel's going to talk about. And a dear friend of mine, a very smart guy, love him dearly, young Timmy, we'll call him. And he is a very smart guy. As I said, he speaks three languages, at least three languages fluently. And a voracious reader and a good writer, et cetera, and so forth. I say all this about his intelligence to point out something, that just because you're extremely intelligent doesn't mean you're paying attention to politics. Okay? And so at least he's registered. Daniel and I be talking about people who aren't registered. And at least he knows there's an election on Tuesday. Daniel and I be talking about people who are utterly clueless, who don't even know there's an election on Tuesday. And at least he knows who the candidates are for Senate. Well, he knows he can name the top three. Okay? So already he's more sophisticated than I would say, and let's see if Daniel agrees with me on this, 90% of the people who are eligible to vote, who don't know who's running, don't know when the election is, and furthermore, more likely than not, are not registered or unaware of where they would vote, even if they are registered. The general vast cluelessness of America. It's been given this great treat, democracy. You get to participate. It's like people dying all over the world for this right. And in America, they're like, oh, man, wow, I think I'll vote for whoever Trump tells me to vote for. Oh, my God, MAGA. Is there a more clueless group of actual participants than MAGA? Sorry, I didn't mean to go there. Anyway, young Timmy is really, he didn't know what to do in the upcoming Democratic primary for Senate. He wants to vote in that race. Now, Daniel, you live in Pennsylvania, so I'll just lay out the land. There are three. There's several candidates, many candidates. I can't remember how many. Look, the cluelessness is a bet. He's a political talk show host. He can't even tell you how many candidates are. I think there's three main ones that everybody knows about. Two are congressmen, Raj Krishnamurthy and Robin Kelly, and the other is the Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, who is a close ally of the Governor J.B. Pritzker. So the polls show that Raj is ahead because Raja raised gazillions of dollars and just bombarded the airways with commercials. And so getting into what Daniel's going to talk about, the level of cluelessness and ignorance in voters is like they saw his commercials. I'll vote for him. That's an Illinois voter, Daniel, right there. I'll vote for him. I saw his commercial. So he's ahead in the polls. And then suddenly people wake up and they go, this guy's a conservative, basically. He's at best a middle-of-the-road Democrat who sees which way the wind is blowing and goes whichever way it is. It never led anything remotely resembling a progressive movement. He's pretending he's a progressive. And so, since Illinois Democrats are dominating progressives, all these people who said they're going to vote for Raja simply because they saw his commercials, because that's all it takes, are saying, I don't know. And then there's another subset of the voters, like my dear friend Timmy, who haven't been paying attention. So at the last minute weighs in and looks, and he goes, well, he said, I'm leaning maybe to Robin Kelly. I go, how did you get to that? I'm just curious. And here's the path he followed. He looked up an article that was posted on Charlie Meyerson's website. Shout out, Charlie. And it led him to Girl, I Guess, voting guide. And in that voting guide, it seemed to him that she was endorsing Robin Kelly. He said, I'll vote for Kelly. I'm leaning toward Kelly. That's all it took. And then I pointed out to him, well, that if you want to vote against Raja, the probably best choice is Stratton. This is strategic voting because Stratton's closer in the polls to Raja than Robin is. So that's a strategic voter. But if in your heart of hearts, based on what Charlie Meyerson wrote and Girl I Guess wrote, means you want to vote for Robin Kelly, vote for Robin Kelly. You should vote for the heart of hearts. Right? You shouldn't be a strategic voter. If you love Robin Kelly. And then he acknowledged he'd really never heard of Robin Kelly until he... You know what, folks? Here's the deal. I think I'll just vote for everybody. Okay. I'm the only one who follows this stuff. So I'm just going to vote for everyone. Okay. You guys send me your little, who you want me to vote for. And I'll just go to the election. Oh, everybody. I'll vote for everybody. Because I don't need Charlie Meyerson to know this stuff. I know it already. I tease, I make fun, I laugh because it's so painful. All right, Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I appreciate you coming on and listening to my opening oration. The purpose of that oration is to sort of shine a light on the things that you're going to talk about that you've spent so much of your life researching.
Yeah.
And I would call it the separation from Americans, of Americans from this sacred right that they have to vote. Like the process has been so trivialized that they don't even see it as a sacred right, Daniel. Yeah. It's at best an obligation, like going to the dentist. 30%. I want to just put that to you, Daniel. 30% to 35% turnout is what we expect for Tuesday's primary. We're supposedly in the midst of this earth-shaking, earth-shattering revolt against the beginning of fascism, and at best, we're going to get 30 to 35%.
Yeah.
Daniel, take it away. Start by telling people what your chief area of scholarship is, and then we'll go from there. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm a sociologist, although as we were discussing, I was almost a political scientist, and I work a lot with political scientists and read their work as well. And, I'm primarily interested in inequalities in political participation in the US. So the fact that higher income people vote at higher rates than lower income people, white people in general vote at higher rates than people of color, people with more education, you get the idea. The more privileged are much more likely to vote, and we end up with a democracy that's very much skewed towards the privileged, towards the better off. And I think that's a real problem for democracy, not to mention a bunch of the stuff you just said, which I think we'll get into shortly.
Okay. And so, we'll start with the big why question. And why is it that more privileged people participate in this than less privileged people?
Yeah, so I think that there's a bunch of reasons, and there's lots of work out there that that aims at various of them. So that a lot of folks think it's barriers, it's that it's difficult and time consuming to vote, and that's part of it. It is in many countries and many states in the US make it easier to vote than others. There's certainly efforts against, to make it more difficult for, broadly, I think the implicit idea is to make it more difficult for people who might vote Democrat to vote, which is, in general, often people who are lower income, people of color, et cetera. Lots of nuances there. But I think that's only part of the story. And the bigger story, or at least the thing that we can't fix participation without thinking about, is sort of what I would call the cultural and experiential aspects of politics, right? Not just what are the laws, what are the, how easy or difficult is it to vote, but what does politics look like to regular people? And as you were just saying, a lot of people feel very, very cut off from politics and see it as something that's not by, for, or about regular, everyday, working class and low income people.
So is there a rationale there? Follow me on this. Long before you were born, there was a theory, well, he's a novelist, but he also delved into political writing named Gore Vidal. And he wrote in the night, I'm not making this up, Daniel, in 1980, wow, it's a long time ago, that he was not going to vote. And the two main choices in that 1980 election were President Jimmy Carter and the Republican nominee Ronald Reagan, who went on to win. He said they were essentially cut from the same cloth. There was no reason to vote. If I vote, I'm only encouraging them. This is a system set up to exclude anybody from participating who thinks like me. and there's no point.
Mhm.
Very kind of nihilistic attitude. There's no point in participating because it would only encourage them. And then he was proud when the election was over that I think the number of people who, like him, did not vote was, I don't know if it was higher than the number of people who voted, but it was very close. And so he was saying there's a logic to not voting. Now that was the best like analysis of not voting. I think his tongue was in his cheek. He was being satirical to a certain degree. He's a great satirist on top of everything else, Gorvidal. But do you see it that way? Do you see like a rationale to not voting, that a pointlessness to it? Is there a part of you that shares that nihilistic view?
So yes and no. Yes, in the sense that, from a lot of positions, both parties are by and large, populated by people who are better off. They, neither has managed to, and this is a lot of what I heard from the people I interviewed, neither has managed to really, in the last 20 years, make a dent in, back up with a little bit of data, but for a lot of people who are in poverty, I'll put it this way, their lives have not changed. For a lot of people who are working class or middle income, they've seen things get worse for them in the last 20 years. So regardless of who's in power. So there's something to that argument. I think where it falls down, right? So the argument that like the options that are on offer, neither of them are as progressive or as radical or as transformative or as connected to poor and working class people or whatever your criteria is, or as anti-war, or you go down your list. The people who are on offer are not as good as we'd like them to be. That's entirely fair, right? I think the question, the problem is how do you deal with that? Right. And, every election that I've been paying attention, and actually was born in 1980, but not old enough to be paying attention.
You were not reading Gorvidal in 1980.
I was not. But every election that I've been paying attention, I'm thinking especially starting in 2000, there's been a contingent of people from the left saying there's no important difference between the parties. Friends of mine were part of Billionaires for Bush and Gore, I think it was called. It was sort of a protest satirical movement saying there's no difference in 2000. So we have this conversation all the time. I think the problem with not voting to deal with that as a strategic move is, the only election where, let me put it this way, there's only been one election in the last 100 years where more people voted for the winner than stayed home. So if the parties were going to do something different because people weren't voting for them, right? If the people in power were going to look around and say like, let's do something else because people were staying home, I think that would have happened by now.
Wait, so could you just repeat that? I have dyslexia, and I just want to, for everybody who has dyslexia out there in the world, and you're welcome, guys. I'm looking out for you. Just repeat that again. What you just said. Go ahead. Only one election in the last 100 years. Go ahead.
Only one election in the last 100 years has the person who won received more votes than the number of people who stayed home. So I'll give you, so 2024. People called it they were wrong, but they called it a landslide for Trump because he at least got a slight majority of the popular vote, right? But 36% of people who
did not get a majority.
He got
a plurality. I always this is very important to
me. The numbers
he's below 50. Look it up on Google right now.
All right. The last time I looked, it was 50.4, and that's what I put in.
Oh wow! Did it? When did that happen?
It might be that I hadn't looked at the last update. It's essentially in all the elections recently, though, it's been essentially 50-50 for the two parties. Okay. But when you look at the entire electorate, it ends up being 30% for Trump, 29, or let's just say 30% for Harris, and we can get to the decimals later. Doesn't really matter. A few percent for third candidates, and in the last election, and this number is precise, 36.3% of people who are eligible stayed home.
Wow.
So more people stayed home, a higher percentage or a larger number, however you want to look at it, whichever kinds of numbers you like better, than voted for either candidate. And the total who voted was larger than the total that stayed home.
So
that's not often true in most of our smaller elections, even in mid-year elections sometimes. midterm elections.
Wait, what happens in midterm elections?
In midterm elections, the turnout is often around 50%, which means that 50 to 60%. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but lower than much lower than presidential years.
Correct.
And so that means that often, in many states, in many places, more people stayed home who were eligible than voted at all. Right? If the turnout is 49%.
Got it. Yes.
Yeah.
Like on Tuesday here in Illinois, it'll be a thundering victory for the people who did not participate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, here's a geeky question of distinction
Mm-hmm.
that only I would ask. And I have a lot of issues, Daniel, and you're helping me sort through that. So, of the people who don't vote,
Mm-hmm.
of that great mass in 2024 who looked at Donald Trump and looked at Kamala Harris and said, I am not voting.
Mm-hmm.
What portion of them are not even registered?
Let's see if I could do that. I cannot do that math in my head right now. I haven't looked at that exactly. A substantial portion. The overall, I cannot come up.
So here's the question I'm asking.
Yes.
And it's like if like Gore Vidal in 1980 was a registered voter. He could, if he wanted, have voted. He chose not to vote.
Yeah.
And even though he's a registered voter,
Mm-hmm.
Joe, I'm just making him up here in Chicago, who's never registered,
Right.
is completely outside of the process.
Mm-hmm.
So he's more alienated from the process. Well, far more alienated than Gore Vidal, who's come up with a sophisticated reason to explain why he doesn't vote.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of your lefty friends are full of sophisticated reasons, none of which I have. I'm more antagonistic toward those reasons than even you are. I have some nihilistic friends. I'm not voting, Ben. I'm better than you. Okay, all right. So this is an important distinction, I know, because I became aware of it really, Daniel, for the first time in 1983. Follow me on this election, when the great Harold Washington was triumphant here in Chicago, the first black man to be elected mayor of the city of Chicago. And there were two things that happened. One, just an outpouring of registration. Jesse Jackson, may he rest in peace, who just died, was one of the leaders of the register to vote. And then, having registered, actually voting. So it was a twofold thing. Do you follow what I'm saying? The people signed up to vote. That's when I realized, oh my God, like my mother when I was 18, you're registering right now, okay? Doris Jarofsky, may she rest in peace. But there's some people whose mothers don't lead them to do that when they're 18. Do you follow what I'm saying? They're outside of it. They never register. Harold got them to register, and then they had a reason to vote. They went and voted for Harold, and the turnout went up. That's why I'm asking you, like, how many are registered and how many are unregistered? That's why I'm asking. That to me is, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think so I can't tell you the registration, not registration numbers off the top of my head. I know the motor voter law and other interventions like that have increased the percentage registered. They didn't make as big a dent as people thought they would in how many were actually voting, let alone in inequalities in voting. So I think what you're really getting at is not so much how many are registered versus not, but how many are sort of strategic, cynical, calculated. That sounds nastier than I mean it to, but thoughtful, ideological from the left or from another political position. I won't vote because I don't believe in the system, and therefore I don't want to support it. Or I can't vote for in the last election it was I can't vote for Harris because of the genocide in Gaza. I can't vote for someone who hasn't come out explicitly on pro-trans on transit, whatever it is, right? I have this very strongly held political value, ideological belief, whatever it is. And many of those, I agree with. But then, to come to the conclusion, therefore I can't vote for this person. Right. So that's one set of people who aren't voting. It's a important set because they're people who are thinking deeply about politics and could very well make other choices. Right. the much larger set, though, I think, is the people, and this is the people that I have spoken with, who are, low income, poor, working class, who aren't, strategically sitting out. What the kinds of things they said to me are much more, I just don't feel like anybody cares about me, anybody understands my issues, anybody is interested in hearing from me or hearing my concerns, or it just doesn't seem like the kind of thing that people like me do. So that, I think, is, that group is both more persuadable, I think, if people were to make the effort to reach out to them, rather than somebody who's stuck into I've thought through my political analysis for the last 20 years, and this is my, I will never vote for a Democrat because A, B, or C. They're more persuadable. And they're, having them left out of democracy, I think, is a larger issue, because they're not necessarily explicitly making an analytic choice.
Okay, so that's very good. We've basically divided it into two categories: the strategic non-voter, which is a person who follows politics deeply and has come to the conclusion that he or she cannot give his sacred vote to any of these people for whatever reason. And then what I will call, based on what you said, the non-strategic voter, who is completely alienated from the process, saying things along the lines, and I'd love for you to elaborate on this, that voting is something that people like me do not do.
Yeah.
Wow. That's deep, man.
Yeah.
Explain. People like me do not do this.
Yeah.
Do you follow what I'm like? You are cutting yourself off from this fundamental right that your democracy provides you, whether it's abused or not. You're just cutting yourself off from that with the explanation that people like me do not do this. A little like me saying, I don't go skiing because people like me don't ski. Actually, I don't go skiing because I hate the thought of rushing down the hill. But I've made that comment. People like me don't ski. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So what are people getting at when people like me don't vote? Explain that.
Yeah. So, we asked everybody, we did interviews with 144 people who were in Pennsylvania, who were low income or working class, who either never voted or only voted very sporadically. And a substantial number of them, we asked all of them, when you think of people who are more involved in politics, what are the kinds of people you think of? We asked it, they're qualitative interviews, so we say it a little differently each time. But, a number of people said things like, I think of somebody who wears a suit all the time. This was someone we called Joe, who was a security officer on a campus, and he said, I just wouldn't imagine an average everyday type of person being that involved in politics. And we heard that kind of thing over and over again, kind of like, I don't know your class background, but people like me don't ski, right? That's a rich people thing, or that's a certain kind of, privileged kind of thing to do, right? People like me don't go to art museums or art openings. I would feel, and if I went to, now I have a partner who would take me to an art opening, but right, how I grew up, if I went to an art opening, I would be completely lost on what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to talk about the art, what can I have as many of those hors d'oeuvres over there as I'd like? Right? Like, what is the is the wine free? Do I pay? I don't know. And so, for a lot of the people we spoke with, politics is sort of a cultural sphere. Even though they get that democracy is important, they get that a vote, is potentially a voice. Politics is a cultural sphere dominated by people more like me now, right? People talked about people who know the people involved having more of a being better able to make decisions because they know who's corrupt and who's not. They talked about people in high-paying jobs. They talked about all people going to black tie functions. We heard over and over this sort of very classed and often also race and gendered idea of what a political person is like, and it wasn't like the people we spoke with.
Well, and I believe, so you said this is not a strategy. I believe that there is a definite strategy by the Republican Party to enhance this attitude. And let me explain. It Donnie Trump says this openly when he's running for office, but it's more like his minions further down the ladder say it all the time. There's no difference between the Democrat and the Republican. They have all sold you out, and they will all continue to sell you out. So there's no point in voting. And that is a message. That's a message that's beamed. It's particularly beamed in the black communities of like Milwaukee and in the Midwest. I'm thinking Detroit, Chicago, and it's very prominent and pronounced in election seasons. Donnie, again, Trump says this. I don't know why you vote for Democrats. Nothing's changed in your neighborhood. He says this. Like,
Yeah.
Of course, he's not even going to make like. This is so bizarre about the whole thing. The point of it is it's like so nihilistic because he is not making any pledges or even going to vaguely care about what happens in your neighborhood. In fact, he'll cut funding for your neighborhood and spend it on something else and openly say it. He doesn't care. But he goes, they pretend they care and your life's terrible. So you might as well not vote or vote for me, which Daniel is like, wow, it's get the reefer out. I mean, that's so bizarre and twisted. So I do believe it's a strategy by the Republican Party to promote that view. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is part of it. On the other hand, they were doing, my understanding, this is not direct data I have, but from reports I've read, the Republicans, the Trump campaign, and some of the people that worked for it, even before they were on the Trump campaign, were talking to more people lower down the, voter propensity score chart than the Democrats tend to. So, campaigns all have access to voter files. The voter files, different companies, use formulas to figure out how likely someone is to vote in the next election. That's their voter propensity score. I've heard a number of anecdotes and seen some actual data as well about how far down that scale people, campaigns go. And I'll give you one story. There was an organization, this was 2020, but there was an organization in Pennsylvania that was grassroots organizing primarily by and for Latino and Hispanic people. They were part of the statewide coordinated effort for the campaign, for the presidential campaign. And so they got funding to do voter outreach. But they were told the priority was people, I'm going to make up the number because I can never remember, but people above, let's say, a 65 on a scale of 0 to 100. And so this organization of grassroots working class Latino organizers, all of the doors they were given to knock were suburban white people because there weren't enough people in the places they were actually organizing with voter propensity scores high enough for them to be sent out to vote.
Wow.
Right. And they were told, if you don't knock these doors, you can't get funding to do, to go lower down the voter propensity score list. So you had them knocking suburban white people doors. Meanwhile, I'm volunteering in my neighborhood and I'm in a neighborhood that's all Black working class people. Right. Bright white guy. I don't live far away from where I was sent. I have some connections to the neighborhood, but I'm, don't have a lot in common in my day-to-day life with a lot of the people whose doors I was knocking on as a professor at an elite college, et cetera. So, but the Republicans do try to match people, match people's racial categories to who they're knocking doors and go lower down the voter propensity score list. So, it's not just negative messages coming from the Republicans. It's also choices. And, to be clear, these are choices being made because people think it's the most strategic, effective, et cetera, thing to do. I would disagree, but it's not bad faith. But it's also gonna, creates a vicious cycle where the least likely to vote, who are also the most likely to be low income, don't hear from campaigns, and then they don't vote, and then they don't get called to ask their opinions on things by campaigns who only want to talk to people who vote, and then they don't have input, and then they don't vote, and I could go on.
Wow, that is so true.
Yeah.
And I had, excuse my utter ignorance, I started the show by acting like I knew everything about politics. I never heard, I wrote it down, voter propensity score. I mean, I learned something new every day, Daniel. Voter propensity score.
Yeah. I mean, and that's new in the last, last 15, 20 years, maybe even less. But I went to a training in Berkeley or Oakland in 2000, early 2000s, probably 2005 or 2006, that they didn't have the scores yet, I don't think, but they made a chart and they just said, we ignore the people who are definite Republicans, fair enough. We ignore the people who are always going to vote Democrat because we don't need to talk to them because we know they'll turn out. And we ignore the people who are never going to vote. And that was, there was sort of a fight in the room because a lot of people were like, somebody should talk to them. And the campaign trainers were just very clear. No, that's not our priority. Somebody else worries about democracy. Our job is to win. And we don't think we can win by talking to the people who never vote. And so that's not what we're going to send you to do.
Wow. Well, I would go one step further and that you may say, well, Ben, you're just being cynical when you say this, but you don't make the money.
Oh, no.
The way you make money in elections is if you air TV commercials, then you get a little piece of the pie.
Mm-hmm.
So if you run on a campaign, like a Bernie style campaign, that's trying to get people who have a low voter propensity score. I love that. It's like how everything is mathematical now in sports, you know what I mean? They got everything. You don't even know what the statistic means. Voter propensity score is equivalent to a good ERA. If you're not going to make any money, if you're Billy Bob and you have a career as a strategist with Democrats, you're not going to make any money getting unregistered people to vote. You only make money when you like air commercials, which essentially are sending messages to people. Don't vote. We don't even care about you voting. We're going to win without you. And every Democratic strategist I know basically says the same thing. We can win without you. We're going for that suburban swing voter that we know will vote. We're not even caring about the people with voter propensity score. I'd love to hear you riff on this. This is why it's a self-defeating message, in my opinion. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a book that came out in 2022 called Producing Politics with a very long subtitle that even I can't always remember, but something like Inside the Exclusive Campaign World Where the Privileged Few Shape Politics for All of Us. And I interviewed campaign professionals, Democrats and Republicans, about how they decide how to make campaign decisions and also about their careers. And I think it's a little more complicated than just who can make money and not, right? Because the campaign manager is not making money based on where commercials go out. It's the communications consultants, the people who actually make the commercials, et cetera. So I think it's two things. One is absolutely there's a financial incentive, and the highest paid people in campaigns are the communications folks. And absolutely they want to run ads as much as they can. Like there's definitely a financial incentive that's part of it. But I also think it's something about the culture of people who work in politics. This is a sort of refrain for me, is that, you can pay attention to the money and the structural issues, and those are super, super important, but it's not the only thing. And it's also, that means, the good news about that is it means it's not the only lever we have to pull if we want to change things. So what I think is the other piece is that people who work in politics, number one, they're weird. And I said this in the book, I start my presentations this way. They told me they're weird, right? They're like, we're political geeks. We've been interested in politics since we were 12. People who started in campaign work right after college told me they felt like they got a late start, right? So they're not usual people at all. They're also weird in exactly the ways that people who are highly involved in politics overall are weird, more white, more upper middle class, et cetera, et cetera. But the other thing about the way campaigns work is that, well, two things. One is there's a set of sort of accepted conventional wisdom, right? This is what we do. This is what's effective. This is what's not. It changes over time, but it changes slowly. And if you want to do something radically different, you're just going to get kicked out of the club. You're just not, if you're arguing with people and telling them they're wrong, or they need to think more about the working class or whatever, you're just a problem and you're not easy to work with. And you're not necessarily going to be kept in the inner circle. And number two, it's really hard to get real-time feedback about the effectiveness of anything you're doing, even with all the polls and data in the world. Yeah. We saw this in 2016. The Hillary campaign was really pretty confident based on all their data and analytics that they were in good shape. they were wrong, right? So it's hard to get feedback about what works actually. What you can get feedback about is what the people around you think is cool or interesting or powerful or et cetera, and how the other side reacts.
Yeah.
You get campaigns that basically work as a, to go back to football, a football match where the voters are the field the game is played on, not necessarily, involved in the game on either team.
Well, then I'm going to come into with a practical case and then have you analyze it. But there's a third category I have to discuss, and I'd love how it fits into your view of the world. And that is the people who vote against their economic interests. And this is kind of an interesting. We talked about this a lot in the last election cycle with the gas 2024 election cycle, where the head of the Teamsters, O'Brien, gave a speech at the Republican convention. This is Republican Party, MAGA Party, that's vehemently opposed to unions, stacking the deck as much as they can with judges and appointees who will undercut union rights. They don't try to hide it. It's the end point of a movement that's been going on since before Daniel was born. When like the powerful titans of commerce and capitalism in this country decided we've got to destroy unions. And so the Republicans go, yeah, we're on this side. And then they got this guy O'Brien. He gets up there and he like names 3 Republicans that he could find that are even like vaguely sympathetic, Daniel. And I mean vague. Let's heavy emphasis on vague, including J.D. Vance. Vaguely sympathetic to a union right. And then he's like patting himself on the back. This is how you play the game, all right? You don't, if you just sit with the Democrats, they take you for granted. I'm going to go with the Republicans who are going to vehemently fight everything I supposedly believe in, but I'm playing the game. So how do you explain people who vote against their own interests, which is one of the true bizarre little aspects of political life in America right now? Go ahead.
Yeah. So I try not to start every response with 3 things, but here I am. I am a professor. That's kind of how I think. So first thing, I just want to go back to the people I interviewed for a minute, because they're not voting. So they're not voting against their economic interests. But, these are people, a lot of the people we spoke with are people who rely on Medicaid, on food stamps, on all kinds of federal programs, Social Security, disability. They weren't all in poverty, and they were of all racial groups and, a variety of incomes, but a lot of them were pretty bad off and really relied on these programs. And so, not voting was clearly not in their economic interest. But they didn't see voting as a lever to pull that was going to have a much likelihood of making a big change. And they, said to me some of the same things you were saying at the very beginning, but that Gordon Vidal said, both parties seem the same to me. Nobody really cares, et cetera. And I think part of that, and I'm going to get back to the people you're talking about who are not these folks broadly, but part of that is because it's so hard to see how social policy works in this country, right? Even when we're doing something that's really good for people, it's really, really hard to trace how that came from whether someone voted, whether a Democrat or a Republican was elected, even if it definitely did. And I'll give you a really concrete example. My partner works in Chester, which is the poorest city in Pennsylvania. She works for a foundation. They get money that was passed by one of the Biden bills. And they get a lot of federal funds to support all the kinds of services that they do. But no one in the, and one of the services they have is doulas, right? Women to go into into birthing rooms with people who are having babies, and support them through that. Chester has one of the highest maternal and infant mortality rates in the country. No one receiving those doulas, the doulas themselves, the clients, the people managing the whole process, no one has any idea that program wouldn't be funded if it weren't for one of the Biden bills, right? And I don't know that they should exactly, right? I don't want people wearing like funded by Democrats t-shirts into their birthing suites, right? Right? But like no one has any idea. And that wouldn't be happening if we hadn't had a Democratic House and Senate and president for a few years.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that gets to, the sort of why do people vote against their economic interests? one is it's really hard to see any effects on your economic interests directly from the president, from the Senate, from the House, even from your governor or city council. There are, but they're hard to trace, not just because we do funding through block grants to foundations, to communities, et cetera, but also because we do so much through tax policy, et cetera. And then the other thing, which I think is worth saying really explicitly, is people don't just think in terms of their economic interests, and they don't just have economic interests, right? Some of the support for MAGA, for Trump, is white people feeling like they're, the capital, the privilege they get from being white is being threatened, and they want to maintain that, right? They want to maintain white supremacy, not necessarily in the like evil Klan way, although some of them that way, but more in a just, I think some of them just in a sense of like, things are changing. I don't feel like I have what I would have expected to have. Other people are getting ahead of me in line. This is from Arlie Hochschild's book. That's how she talks about it. Those people over there seem like they're getting more stuff than me. So like, let's blow it all up, or let's vote for the guy who's going to change things, or et cetera, et cetera. And that's, that's a big part of it. I think it's not people, weighing my economic interests versus my hatred of immigrants. It's more like, things don't seem to be working the way I'd like. Let's do something different.
Yeah. By the way, that was a great riff, Daniel. I got to give you credit for that. But I got to tell you that Donald Trump, I know you said that the Doula line, which is pretty funny, which I can't recreate at the moment. But Donnie would put it on a T-shirt.
Oh, he would.
That's the difference between Donnie and Democrats, among many other things.
Yeah, we believe in, generally speaking, we're more on the side of like, let's just do the right thing, and let's, hope that people figure it out. But, I'll give you one other really, really small example, but there was another person I interviewed who wasn't a regular voter, older Black man, North Philadelphia, wife was disabled, and he told me, if he was going to vote in 2024 and Trump was on the ballot, he was going to vote for Trump. Trump sent him a check during the pandemic.
Yeah, see what I'm saying? Come
right,
on,
and
man.
And he signed it. Never mind that the Democrats also gave people money, right? But like, Trump's name was on a check. And, and again, like, I feel like what we often do, we, meaning people who are really engaged in politics, paying a lot of attention, is we sort of deride these people, right? How could you not realize what's the matter with you? You should do your research, whatever. But I really think that it's the job of people in politics to help people understand this, right? I mean, obviously individuals have responsibility and agency and all of that. But if no one's reaching out to these people and saying, hey, like, this is a party, this is an organization that wants your vote, that cares about you, that's interested in what you have to say, if instead they're saying we're going to sway the swing suburban soccer mom or whatever it is this year, then it's not surprising people use the information that they have.
Fair enough. I will just say this, and I don't know the gentleman that you're mentioning, but I'm old, so he and I are about the same age, I'd say. Okay, we grew up with the same things, and for all I know, he went to high school with me. So I'm just saying, let's say your name is Billy. Billy, come on, you're smarter than that. You know you're smarter than that, right? Don't act dumb. And that's the difference. I get in trouble with a lot of my millennial listeners, Daniel, because I say this, because I say voters. I've come to the position in life that Americans are unbelievably clueless. And it's a painful reality for me. And I don't say I'm superior. I always go, I'm not. I don't know anything about phones. I couldn't tell you anything about hip hop or rap music. The list of things I do not know, Daniel, that everyone in America knows is vast. Like, I watch a TV show and the Z's are like, oh, you don't know this actor? I never heard of the guy before. But I'm not saying I'm better than them because I know politics and they know some movie star. I'm just saying they choose to put their brains at a different place. But to go through life and say, I'm going to vote for Donald Trump because he put his name on a bailout check that was bipartisan in nature, which was probably was mainly pushed by Democrats. It shows a staggering lack of what's the word? Just a staggering lack of interest in how your world works. I don't know what else to say, Daniel. My attitude toward the guy is, are you kidding me, dude? Come on, man.
Yeah.
We grew up together. Go ahead, Daniel.
Well, I mean,
Defend
what I'd say back
Go.
is, you had me at the beginning for the sound check say I'm from Philadelphia and I love the Eagles, right? If I were in Dallas, I would be supposed to love the Cowboys.
That's good.
As I understand it, I'm not a football guy, so I might mess this up, but that's kind of the point, right? If I were in Dallas and I decided to love the Cowboys, some number of people would tell me that is a terrible choice because they're bad cheaters, something, right? Again, no offense to Cowboys. I don't know enough to know anything, right? But there's people have views on which teams are sort of the good teams and which teams are the bad teams. People have views on which teams are more ethical or whatever else, or which kinds of people like which teams. I don't know, but I don't know. Right. And I'm not invested in knowing, even though football is the national pastime. I'm an American. If you are in Philadelphia and the Eagles are doing well and you can't say go Eagles back to somebody, you could get yelled at. Right. Like, you really should know about football if you're going to be an American in this country. What is the matter with me that I haven't invested the time to figure out what even, who's the coach of the Dallas Cowboys and whether they actually deflated a ball one time or if that was even the Cowboys or somebody else? I don't know. Right.
The Patriots. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. See, that's my point. It was somebody we played in some Super Bowl, but that's my point. I know nothing.
Yes, correct.
Right.
Okay.
And a lot of people who really care about politics would think I was a ridiculous idiot, probably not a very good man, right? For not knowing, just like you feel about people in politics. And and I think an even better comparison in some ways is more elite things, right? Like another project I was part of, we talked to people who were higher class. We had people saying, if you can't appreciate opera, you are missing out on life. You are, something is really wrong with your soul if you can't appreciate opera. So the difference, of course, is politics does affect all our lives in a way that football and opera don't necessarily, right? That's the difference, but it's not really that obvious to most
people. There's one other difference that you're overlooking, which is hugely important.
What's that?
I'm not asking you, Daniel, who knows nothing about football, to decide who's the MVP.
That's true.
I'm not asking you, Daniel, or maybe you know opera. I'm not asking myself, who knows nothing about opera, to decide which opera company is the best opera company in America. Your friend in Philly who was going to vote for Trump because Donnie signed his name on a check that wouldn't have passed without Democrats fighting like hell for it, gets as much of a say as you do, who spend your entire life. And I'm like, this is bizarre, ladies and gentlemen, where people who know nothing and are so clueless.
Yeah. But that's, on the other hand, we don't want to have poll tests. We don't want to have literacy tests.
No.
We want people to participate.
That's
correct. So given that they're going to participate, absolutely in an ideal world, everybody, and actually this was a reason some people I talked to didn't vote also, is they felt like they did, they would need to do so much research to understand what was going on, to know who was corrupt, to know who was not corrupt.
That's true.
And so a lot of them stayed home for that reason too. It felt too complicated. It felt too elusive. And I will say, most of these people, so, this guy, he wasn't paying that much attention to politics, but he could tell me like what were the issues in his neighborhood, what had happened with, with the benefits he had access to, what was the, what were the concerns he and his wife were, they weren't dumb, right? They weren't, and they weren't apathetic. They were just sort of looking around and saying, nobody's done anything for me except this one thing that I can see.
All right.
So again, I think he was wrong sort of empirically, but I think it's important for people who want to win these folks' votes to have, which is not your job either, right? But to have some empathy and understanding of where they're coming from.
No, I think the lesson I take away from that, if I'm Joey Biden or anybody, well, he's out of politics now, but anybody, is put your name on everything.
Right.
That's the lesson I take away from that. And by the way, there's always a chance that the man was being satirical. So I'm going to cut him the most slack. He was being satirical.
I'm not sure satirical, but I'm also not sure he was definitely, it wasn't like I am going to make sure I, get there on that day and do he was more like,
I'm going to vote for Trump because
here's a guy who did something for me.
All right. I'm going to get, let's and by the way, I've often advocated satirically that I should be the only one allowed to vote in Chicago, since I'm the only one who knows how the TIF program works. And then people go, "You're an elitist, Ben." And I go, "Okay, well, whatever." Anyway, all right. I have taken the time to understand how it works, guys. You haven't. All right, let's deal with this, an aspect of all this, very practical example that recently took place. I think I told you I was going to do this. So there was just a Democratic primary in Texas. Jasmine Crockett, the congresswoman, running against James Tallarico, who I believe is a state senator. Correct me if I'm wrong, either state rep or state senator. And it was fascinating to watch, Daniel, the way what people I know who follow politics were responding. And it broke down by, if you might have can anticipate, a race. So this grand generalizations. The white people I know said, they love Tallarico. He speaks to swing voters, and that's who we need to get elected. Most of the black people I know said, I love Jasmine Crockett. I love her message, defiance. It's her voice that we need in the Democratic Party, because that'll get people who aren't registered to vote to register and participate. And that's how we can win. And in this dynamic, it was absolutely everything you've been talking about, everything you spent your life researching, for crying out loud. And I would love to see how you feel about that election. Tallarico was victorious, by the way. I think he won, I forget, 53% of the vote, something
like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so how do you see that dynamic that just played out in Texas? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think, I looked at some of it. It does look like it played out. I looked at the county by county, who won, who lost. It looks like the counties with the highest percentage of black voters were the ones where Crockett did better, and the reverse for Tallarico. But that dynamic of whose voice do we need, who can win the base? I think two things. I think one, most primary voters, right? Primary voters are even less representative of the U.S. as a whole than general election voters. It's a small, it's usually, I didn't look at the percent turnout. I know it was a little higher than usual in the Democratic primary, but it tends to be more educated, more well off, et cetera, older. I'm not sure we're the best, and I'm not sure Democratic Party officials either are the best at guessing who's going to resonate with which groups. So I would have leaned more towards Crockett for the same kinds of reasons. But I actually think, one, who's the candidate matters. But there, one of our recommendations in this report that just came out, the political disconnect, one of the recommendations is include more working class people from working class and low income backgrounds as politicians, as candidates, and as political staff in all in all levels of government and politics. We don't do that very much at all. But I also think what matters at least as much is, what is the organizing capacity? What are the sort of, organizational year-round structures that connect people to politics or don't? So, one of our other recommendations is, better and more consistent and more frequent presence in low-income and working class communities. So I guess what I'd say about Crockett Tallarico is, I'm not worried because Tallarico won. I don't think that, and you do have to win, to win, especially a state like Texas, you do have to win some people probably who might otherwise vote Republican. The strategic calculus is not made up. And there's always this debate between, do we try to bring out more of the base, which is sometimes just a euphemism in the Democratic Party for black voters, or do we try to win the swing voters, which is often a euphemism for, suburban white people, basically. We can get into all of how accurate those are, but that's often what people mean. But I think really what we need is more outreach, more organizing, more listening, more connection to the communities and the people who are not voting, who feel excluded, who feel like politics isn't for them. And, at the end of the day, the candidate, I won't say the candidate doesn't matter, Barack Obama had a huge upswelling of turnout, especially among Black people, for exactly the reasons of, people felt hopeful, people felt like it was, somebody representing them for the first time, etc. But he also had an enormous field campaign driven by volunteers. Same thing with Mamdani, who recently won in New York. So that field campaign, that fabric that connects people to politics, I think is in some ways at least as important as the candidate, if not more important.
Well, to your point, I was listening to you and I was remembering going back to that. I've already alluded to it once, but it was such a pivotal moment in my life in learning how politics works. 1983 mayoral campaign here in Chicago, where Harold Washington was victorious. He was not just a Black man, he was a lefty. And it just blew my mind. My little lefty brain just blew up that, wow, someone who views the world the way I do just got elected mayor of Chicago. Of course, the powers that be in the city did everything they could to sabotage him from the moment he stepped into office. And then once he had died, they did everything they could to make sure that nobody even remotely resembling him ever got in office again. So you wonder why so many people are skeptical about politics. But I'll close with this. The one thing I learned is that in the case of race, the more a candidate made an effort to get Black people to vote for him, the more white people didn't vote for him. And this is a calculus, I think you, as you would call it, a calculus that most political strategists figured out. And they may not say it out loud, but they figured it out. And so what they did in the aftermath was make sure they didn't appeal directly to Black people. And you could do the same thing with economic issues. The more a candidate like Bernie Sanders appeals directly to poor people or working class people and saying, I'm going to divert the money that's going to the wealthiest to you, I'm going to redistribute, the more alienated wealthy people will be. And since they're the ones who vote anyway, in both Democrat and Republican, it's a losing strategy. Do you follow what I'm saying, Daniel? So in some ways, it's all self-defeating. I don't want to end this show on such a downer note. Please rescue me from this with something a little more optimistic. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the self-defeating thing, it's, it hasn't been true. And I will say that, it hasn't been true in every election, right? So like, you do periodically get candidates that appeal more broadly. And I think more importantly than that, there's way more people who are low income, working class, middle class than there are billionaires or millionaires or the top 10 or 20, by definition, the top 10% or 20% of income earners, right? So it's not impossible to have a democracy that actually includes everyone. It's not natural or given that low income people stay home and high income people vote more. It's possible to change that with organizing, with being clear about how to, the third recommendation in the report is connect problems to solutions, make it really clear what those are. That might not mean, put Biden's name on t-shirts for doulas, but it might mean do a lot more to make explicit what the relationship is between different parties and the outcomes we see, or have policies that more directly help people. So it's not, we're not stuck forever in not having policies that represent the interests of working class, low income people, people of color, etc. It's very possible to have that. It just requires actually organizing people in those communities.
I'm going to close with this. You have given me some hope, and I'm not being facetious when I say this, but you have given me some hope, and I now see the light. You got to put your name on everything. Put your name on the check. Yes. Put that name on the t-shirt to the doulas. They got to know. You can't have one doula in America who's going to vote for Donald Trump. Okay? You just got, that would be as dumb as the richest guy. Well, they have so much money, it doesn't matter who gets elected. But do you see my point? I do believe that that voter in North Philly, he educated me today. Put your name on the check. Absolutely, Democrats. That would be my takeaway from Daniel. In closing, do you think I am being too cynical when I say that?
I think the name on the check is part of it. I have a lot of friends who are interested in universal basic income or those sorts of things. I think it really also, though, is not just, it's not just the name, it's not just the message from the candidate, it's also how it's communicated and who it's communicated by. And that's something, we spend billions and billions of dollars every election cycle at this point. Spend $1 billion on, I did the math when a while ago, I'm not going to get it exactly right, but you could have thousands of organizers year round in every county for $1 billion, right? For 4 years. So spend one of those billions of dollars we're going to spend in 2026 and 2028 on, hiring people year round who live in the communities you're trying to reach. Don't hire 22-year-old college students from Massachusetts to go talk to people in North Philadelphia, right? Hire people who live in the communities you're trying to reach and have them talk to people about what their concerns are and help them understand, here is this policy that was passed 2 years ago that's funding this community center that wouldn't exist otherwise, or whatever it is. That, I think, could get us very, very, very far towards having a democracy that includes everyone and having policies that really work for more people.
All right, we'll leave it there. Daniel, it's a blast talking to you. I hope you come back. Maybe after we can analyze some of the Illinois votes. And yes, there's no I just want to relieve you of this. There's no reason you should be a Philadelphia Eagles fan. Worthy of your fandom. There, I said Philadelphia Eagles. Okay. You should be a Bears fan. No, just kidding. You should stay out of football. Oh my God. You talk about they're all evil. The whole system is set up to make more money for the people who run it in every single way. And all these dummies like me, we buy into it. I'm just a fan. So I'm as hard on myself, Daniel, as I am on any voter in North Philadelphia who voted for Donald Trump because he put his name on a check. Okay. At least
fair enough.
Daniel, thank you so much. I appreciate it. It was a blast talking to you. And we'll bring you back if you agree to come back. I also want to thank producer Chris. He does an outstanding job, and I know Daniel agrees when they say, hey, producer Chris, give yourself a raise. Take it out of petty cash. Peace and love, everybody.